highest mental power that we humans have, the source really of our intelligence, is what they call theory of mind. That we are able to place ourselves in the bodies and the minds of other people. What's made us the supreme social animal, right? But it's the source of all of our intelligence, right? It's the source of our science. A great scientist like an Einstein is thinking inside the very subjects he's trying to get into, right? That's the source of our power. And so high-level empathy, where you're able to think inside of other people, to kind of imagine what they are going through, what their feelings are, is to me the highest passion of all, which is a form of love, and it is extremely sublime. But if you want to win this war, let's call it a war against this type of thinking, you can't just like get angry and close the door on them and just say, go away, you're evil, you're bad. We have to live with them, right? They're in our midst every day. And so if our politicians and people in charge were smart, which they're not, they would have that mentality. They would have the idea that you can't just alienate people and antagonize them and push them further into their corner. So even to get Congress or the president to mandate vaccinations like they've done in other countries, you're going to get immense pushback, right?
Right.
So how are you going to deal with that? So we so intellectualize and verbalize things, but life is a feeling inside your body. It's an energy, it's a force. How could you ever put the words that would describe what it's like? It's ineffable, but you know it when it's like leaving you, what that feeling is like. So there was another woman who she wrote a great book about her stroke called Stroke of Insight, Jill Bolte. She became a neuroscientist. She had a much worse stroke, and she literally felt all of the life draining out of her body, inch by inch by inch, as death was passing through her. I had a little bit of that, and I also felt that this kind of force that is being alive is like being drained out of me. It wasn't as strong as that because my stroke wasn't as bad, but I did connect to the feeling of life and the feeling of death, because I had the feeling of death in my body. As I described earlier, the sense of my bones kind of shriveling and melting and getting soft, and kind of everything that makes you alive kind of leaving your body. So it makes you aware that there's a physicality to being alive, to being conscious, and to that you carry your death within you. But so people have this wrong impression about Stoicism, which came back to sort of something we were talking about yesterday, where they kind of accuse you sometimes of not being Stoic, or it's a struggle. Even for Marcus Aurelius, it was a continual struggle. Even for Epictetus, or however you pronounce it, it was a continual struggle. It's not like you're suddenly a Stoic, you got a diploma, and now you're continually struggling with your human nature. So it's the resistance that kind of makes you stronger. And the more, so sometimes like the times that you're born in, like sometimes I wish, damn it, why couldn't I have been born in like the 19th century or in ancient Athens? There's some things about the 2020, the 2021 that I just don't like, I would have been so much happier, but then I have so much to resist against that it almost is almost like a form of pleasure that I have to like struggle even harder to focus on reading. And reading a book now, reading Nietzsche or reading Marcus Aurelius is triple the pleasure when you live in a world that's so antithetical to it, right? Conflict is kind of inherent in the human condition. So your path through life is never going to be easy. There's always going to be resistance. There's always going to be people who oppose you. When I wrote the war book, the other metaphor was the samurai warrior. That was a major theme in it. And Musashi talks about the stance of the warrior. And it's the stance that matters. It's how you meet the adversary, how you position yourself, how you're calm, how you position the sword, and how you're ready for the attack. The attack might not come, or the opponent might just give up and walk away, or there may be somebody who come from behind but you're ready, you're prepared, you're in the proper stance. So I always think of it kind of in those terms. Are you prepared? So I don't want people to be paranoid. I don't want them to go around thinking everybody's evil and they're about to attack me. I want you to be in life to have this kind of composure, this stance like a warrior. You're prepared for the worst. You're not expecting the worst, but you're prepared for it if it happens. And if some kind of crap comes your way, you know how to fight, you know how to defend yourself, you know how to get out of bad situations. And I say that because I myself, before I wrote the book, I violated a lot of times. The stance that I was in was all wobbly. I was too emotional. I wasn't strong. I wasn't like in a firm position, etc. But Musashi would counter it in that the great samurai warrior becomes one with his weapon. It is simply an extension of his arm. And he had a famous sword fight. He had many very classic famous sword fights where he didn't have a sword, right? And he defeated his opponent. So it didn't matter that it was necessarily this hard piece of steel. It was how he used it. And he thought of it as an extension of his arm. So, it was literally not like a prosthesis. When I'm meditating, I become extremely aware that thinking is almost a form of a disease. I get that idea constantly as I'm meditating. Like thoughts are coming up, and they're negative thoughts. 90% of the thoughts that come up uncontrollably are about anxiety. They're about people who've done things to you that you don't like. It's about problems with people, etc. So many of the thoughts are negative, and you're anticipating, as you say, negative things happening to you. And it's almost like thinking is the problem itself because it divorces you from the moment.
Right.
So I often have the idea as I'm meditating, there's a world out there that has nothing to do with me. It's completely indifferent to Robert Greene. The birds could care less about my fate. The trees don't know anything about my existence. The sky doesn't care at all about me, right? Okay, that's the reality, that's the world. But my thinking creates this thing as if I'm the most important thing in the universe, that everything that happens is going to happen to me and is going to be bad, etc. So to be able to see that thinking traps you so many times into patterns, that you've been programmed to respond to situations, a lot of times by anxiety, like thoughts pop up about, I've got to do this phone call, or, oh, I forgot to email that person, or damn it, that this interview is coming up and I don't want to do it, or blah, 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 blah. So much of the thoughts are anxieties that you're anticipating. So the other thing about Musashi that's brilliant, that's very applicable to life, was he treated each opponent as different. He never repeated the same strategy twice. He surmised the opponent either before the fight or during the fight to see what their psychology was, to see what their weaknesses were, what their strengths were, so he could neutralize their strength. And he never repeated the same strategy twice. He always looked at his opponent as an individual. I have to adapt to their style. I have to mirror them sometimes. So he had this one quote about, if I yawn and I feel tired, I will induce that in my opponent. Although I'm not really yawning and feeling it, I'm going to make this person tired by my apparent lackadaisical attitude. So I found that brilliant, because so many people in life, they're bad strategists. Most people are awful strategists because they're locked in the past and they're constantly repeating what worked a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. They don't look at the individuals they're dealing with, their employees, and say, this person has a particular psychology, this one's very different. I have to approach each person differently. They take the path of least resistance and they do this kind of cookie cutter approach where I'm just going to apply the same strategies to each person. And Musashi was the complete opposite of that. If you can just control that, if you could just see that is the source of your problem, and that the world is indifferent to you, and that the circumstances are totally neutral, and that newspaper article that comes out, you can't control it, and maybe the bad stuff will actually in the end rebound to your favor, or it'll make you tougher, it'll make you realize certain things. If you can just see them as facts, as opposed to like these horrible things inside your head, these phantasmos, whatever the Latin word is, then you've got the power. So directing a film, if you've known other people who've done it, is an extremely stressful job. It's like directing an army into a campaign, because problems are arising that you cannot anticipate. There's all this pressure, there's all this money. You've got insane egos of actors, producers, etc. And so it's a constant adrenaline rush going through. You can't control your emotions. So Hitchcock, people would look at him on the set and he'd be falling asleep in the director's chair. He'd look like Buddha. His eyes were closed. Why? Because he prepared for everything. He anticipated everything that was going to happen, right? And so by the time the film came, he was completely bored because he knew he was able to control every aspect of the production. So I know, for instance, if I have to go on live television, which is almost like having a sword fight with Musashi, right? Mm-hmm. For 10 minutes, everyone around the world is seeing you live. If you say something stupid or you blank out, you're humiliated.
Or if you're boring, they'll cut the interview short.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. It's the worst thing. It's the worst. I don't know if you can agree with me, but it's one of the worst things ever. So what I've learned is I'm going to prepare the hell out of it. I'm going to have everything nailed down, right? And then sometimes they don't ask you the questions you anticipated. It goes off in other directions. But when you enter that green room or where you're ready to be interviewed, you have a calmness because you prepared. You know what your answers are going to be. You're not sitting there in the moment trying to figure things out. So I think that's kind of similar to what you're saying there. The other thing I advise people, a lot of it, stressful situation or job interviews. And the best defense is to be so thoroughly prepared. You've studied that company like it's the back of your hand. You know the person who's interviewing. You've done massive amounts of research. You've just done all the detail work, and you prepared what more or less you're going to say. Then you go in, it's a completely different mindset than if you're just going to wing it. Well, preparation, that's why Hitchcock could fall asleep. When you're prepared, you're calm. Yeah. So when you've done your work, and you get on the golf course, or you get in the boxing ring, or you get on the interview stage, yeah, you're going to be nervous, and yeah, you're going to have adrenaline, because I've found if you don't have adrenaline, you're not focused enough. You need a little bit of nervous energy. Sure. But there's a difference between being nervous energy and it forecloses your ability to think in the moment. But when you're prepared, you're able to be calmer, and then if people surprise you with a question, you're not suddenly flustered, because you entered with it with a much higher degree of calmness than if you try to just completely fling it. Yeah, and the other thing that's similar to and it's from Marcus Aurelius that's related, is look at things as they are. So you're drinking wine, think of the grapes being crushed. You're having olive oil, think of the olives being crushed. That's a lot of the sublime, because you're walking around in your world and you're kind of sleepwalking. Yeah. You're not paying attention to things, and you're not really seeing things as they are. So you're drinking your orange juice from some plastic bottle. You're not aware of the oranges or the process or what people went through. I mean, I know that if you were, that might not be that exciting, so that's maybe not the best example. But being aware of where things come from, of what they are, of what their true nature is, that's sort of how the children think, because they're constantly curious. They just don't assume that something just came into the world the way it is. They want to know how, and they want to know why. So you live in a world where you're surrounded by things that exist that kind of, you don't really know where they come from or what makes them so interesting, and you're not paying attention to it. So some people have this idea of the sublime, like you have to do these incredible things. It has to be some amazing experience. You have to climb Mount Everest to have that rush and just look down on the world, or you have to be in a space. You have to be with Jeff Bezos on Blue Origin. Sure. It's pathetic. It's stupid. It's silly. The sublime is around you. It's around just looking at your skin, realizing your own body, your own physiology. It's in everything around you is weird and sublime if you look at it a certain way.